Having an emergency food storage is crucial, especially right now. But the emergency food most people think of is not the healthiest, and some people can't eat those foods at all. Have you ever wondered if there's a healthier way? Hey guys, it's Jara with Wicked Prepared. Welcome back to the channel. Here at Wicked Prepared, we are all about emergency preparedness and helping everyday people be prepared to take care of themselves and their family, no matter what happens. We talk a lot about emergency food storage because that is one of the most important first steps to being prepared. Having a well-stocked prepper pantry can see you through a lot of situations, from a few days power outage or a short-term supply chain disruption to a much longer-term SHTF scenario, or even a more personal crisis like losing your job or an extended illness. Right now, we are at a tipping point in our country and across the globe. We must have our homes stocked and ready. We have done several videos about emergency food storage. We always get a lot of questions and comments from viewers about what to store if they or their family member can't eat the typical prepper pantry foods. What can they store if they need to eat a lower carb diet? So today I'm going to show you some different things that you can stock your prepper pantry with for a low carb or keto diet. People follow these ways of eating for a lot of different reasons. Sometimes it's vanity reasons, like just for weight loss, but a lot of the time it's actually for medical reasons, like controlling carbs for diabetes. The keto diet in particular was actually originally developed as a way to control epileptic seizures. So often a low carb or keto way of eating is medically necessary, and being able to maintain that way of eating during a crisis could be a life or death matter, especially during a situation when traditional medical care and prescription medications might not be accessible. If you eat this way for vanity reasons, you might decide you could change your way of eating during an emergency situation if you had to. However, if you store foods that you wouldn't typically eat and you store them for just in case situations, the problem is that you're not going to be rotating your food storage, and that is a big mistake. When people do that, things go bad, they get past their dates, people just end up throwing it all out, and that wastefulness is what sours a lot of people on the idea of having an emergency food storage. Besides, it's not good for anyone's body to have to suddenly change their way of eating for any reason. So no matter why you eat a low-carb diet, it's best to follow the principles of store what you eat and eat what you store. The prepper pantry items that I'm going to show you today could work for lots of different diets. There's a basic low-carb diet and all of its different forms, such as the Atkins diet. These are often high-protein diets. The keto diet is a more specific form of a low-carb diet that focuses on low carbs, high fat, and moderate protein. Even within the keto diet itself, there's different ways of doing it. Some people follow a lazy, dirty type of keto, and some people are a lot more strict. A lot of the foods I'm going to talk about today would also work for a carnivore diet, a paleo diet, and even a gluten-free diet, because a lot of the foods that I'm going to mention today will be gluten-free, although not all of them. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about each of these types of diets. I'm assuming that if you're following a certain way of eating, you know what criteria you're following, and you can determine which of these foods will fit into your needs. But hopefully this will give you a lot of different options and a lot of different ideas for your prepper pantry. So let's get started. There are a couple of different ways to look at this. Number one, you can find shelf-stable versions of the foods that you already eat that fit your needs. And secondly, you can look at keto or low-carb versions of typical prepper pantry foods that everyone else stores. And of course, there are some typical prepper pantry foods that are already naturally low carb or keto. So typically a keto or low carb diet includes lots of protein foods, more specifically animal proteins, because they are very low in carbs naturally. All of these foods would also fit into the carnivore diet. So first up, I've got proteins. Protein is a big part of any keto or low carb diet, most specifically animal proteins. So this would also work for a carnivore diet. So I've got meats, cheese, and eggs here to begin with. I've got a bunch of canned meats and some freeze-dried meats as well. There's all sorts of different meats that you can get, so there's so much variety. There's pork, chicken. These are obviously some fish, some salmon, and some tuna. There is shredded beef and some more chicken, turkey, lots of different meats that you can get in a can. Of course, there are some other canned meats like Vienna sausages and potted meat and things like this that are very low in carbs. Like this potted meat has 0 grams of carbohydrates, but these meats do have ingredients that aren't really very desirable. They have a lot of other things in them, so depending on how clean you want to eat, you might want to stay away from things like this, but they are low carb and they do have the benefit of being really inexpensive and being in small size containers. If you are a single person or just a couple of people. Meat in pouches can be another option. This is a seasoned beef, but it still has 0 grams of carbs, even though it has some seasoning in it. These are easy to open, easy to carry, and small serving sizes. Of course, they're not going to be quite as long lasting as a can. In addition to canned meats, you can also get freeze-dried meats for your prepper pantry. Some of these have the benefit of having a much better texture for specifically the chicken and the ground meats like ground beef and sausage. A lot of people don't really care for those kind of meats canned. So that's one benefit of the freeze-dried. Another benefit is that they have a longer shelf life. Canned foods have a really long shelf life. They are going to last for years and years. They're going to have a best by date, but they're going to last for many years past that date. So they do last a very long time as long as the can stays intact. Freeze-dried food typically lasts 25 years as long as the can stays intact when it's in the can. It also has the benefit of being shelf stable after the can is open. So if you open a can of meat, you have to use that up or refrigerate it. So if you don't have refrigeration, you're going to want to go with smaller cans or whatever your family can handle. With freeze-dried meats, you can keep them at room temperature, open for about a year, as long as you keep them just in a container with a lid on it. You'd also need some extra water on hand to reconstitute freeze-dried meats. Now they can be eaten dry, but if you're going to make a meal out of them, you're going to want to add some water. But some of these, like the sausage crumbles, is actually one of my favorite keto snacks to have just snacking on it dry. Eggs and cheese are another thing that I eat a lot of on a keto diet. So having some shelf-stable versions of those is a really great thing to have. For prepper pantry cheese, usually you're stuck with something like Velveeta, so that's why I like to go with freeze-dried, because this is actually real cheese. It's just freeze-dried, so it's shelf-stable. And you can see there's 0 grams of carbohydrates, and this is not a processed cheese product. This is just real cheese. It has cultured pasteurized skim milk, salt, enzymes, and a little bit of potato starch to prevent caking. So it's a natural starch. It's not enough to affect the carb count. Still has 0 carbs per serving. Cheddar cheese is the same. This is real cheese with a 25-year shelf life. And then eggs, of course. Eggs are a huge part of most any low-carb diet. They can be part of carnivore. They're very keto. They're really very good for you. They're high in protein. For egg powder, you want to make sure that you pick an egg powder that you like the taste of. So definitely try them out, and also look for added ingredients, because a lot of these have added ingredients. This one just has eggs. Whole eggs, egg yolk, and dried egg whites. It says glucose removed for stability. That's something to do with the magic of how they make these a really good tasting egg product. And actually, if you think about it, what is glucose? Glucose is sugar. So they've actually removed some of the natural sugar from the egg. So that makes it even better for low carb and keto. This is the only brand we found where we really like them as eggs. A lot of the eggs out there are great as a baking ingredient, but they're not really that tasty to eat as eggs. So this is a great one that we love. These can be used to make a lot of different things. A lot of people will use canned chicken along with eggs and cheeses to make all sorts of different things. Pizza crusts and flatbreads and things like that. There's lots of different keto recipes that you can use, and a lot of them use things like eggs and cheese and chicken. You can also grind the freeze-dried chicken up because it is dry. You can powder it and use it as a 0 carb sort of flour. You can bread things with it. You can do lots of things with it. Next up, for another protein, this is something a little bit different. This is black soybeans. Normally you would not have beans in a low carb diet because beans have quite a bit of carbohydrates, so they're not keto or low carb. Black soybeans is the exception to the rule. This is something I just learned about within the last year or so. Black soybeans are a keto bean. I have found them canned like this, and I have found them dry, like a dry bean like you would keep in your prepper pantry as well. So I will link both of those down below. You can see that they have 11 grams of carbohydrates, but they also have 6 grams of fiber. Most people, not all people, most people count net carbs, which means you subtract the fiber from the carbs to get the net carbs. So these would be 5 grams of net carbs. Now, you know if you are a person who counts net carbs or counts total carbs. So it's up to you to decide whether or not the black soybeans can fit into your diet. Next, I have some dairy items that can be considered keto or low carb. Of course, I had the cheese over here, which is a great low carb dairy item. And these are some more. The cheese you could eat on its own. You can use like cheese. These items I'm usually using as an ingredient for something else. Part of a sauce, part of a soup, something like that, part of a dish, part of a meal in a jar. I have got cream cheese powder here. This is a low carb item, and cream cheese is something that I use a ton of when I'm eating low carb. I use it, like I said, a lot of the time I'm using it as an ingredient. I can whip up a casserole or something and make a creamy sauce for it. Instead of using a cream soup or something that has a lot of carbs in it, I use things like cream cheese, heavy cream, bouillon seasonings, things like that, and make a sauce. So cream cheese powder is something that I use a lot of. There is media crema. This is a canned item. So this is like a heavy cream or a light cream in a can. So this is a great item to have for the pantry. You can use this in a lot of different ways that you would use a heavy cream. You can see this does have less than 1 carb per serving. 1 serving is only a tablespoon. So just like if you're using heavy cream, you use very little of it. If you were to drink a whole cup of it, you would get a lot more carbs, obviously. But this is used sparingly. I do have sour cream powder. Sour cream is something that I do use when I'm eating low carb a lot. So this is 3 grams of carbs. It's a little bit higher, but it's still a good thing to have for adding some creaminess to your dishes. And then I also have coconut milk. This is a good low carb milk. I've got it in a can, and I've got coconut milk powder. So depending on your purpose, I use the coconut milk powder in meals in a jar and things a lot. This coconut milk you can use in soups and stews and curries and things like that with a lot of vegetables and seasonings to make a really good dish. This has 2 grams of carbohydrates per serving with, it says less than 1 gram of fiber, which means it has probably part of a gram, because it wouldn't say that if it had 0 grams. So I'm going to consider it to have 1 point something grams of net carbs. And then of course, almond milk is a good low carb alternative to regular milk. This one says it is carrageenan free. I think that's how you pronounce that, which that's something that a lot of people try to avoid. This is actually great because this one you can actually get at Dollar Tree. And you can see it has 1 gram of carbs per serving. So this is good as an ingredient, as a drink, as you could have it with certain cereals, which I can show you some keto cereal alternatives coming up in a little bit. And then behind here, I have a heavy cream powder. So this is another thing that I use as an ingredient. You can use this to make something creamy like you would. I put this in meals in a jar a lot. This is a good keto-friendly, non-GMO heavy cream powder that I really like and I use a lot of. So next over here, going along with the protein foods, I have some nuts and seeds and nut butters. Now nuts and seeds can be iffy in the prepper pantry because they can tend to go rancid because they have a lot of oils in them, but they actually can last for quite a while. And like I mentioned, you really should be rotating all of these foods. And because these are such healthy foods, there's no reason not to be rotating them. I don't have my peanut butter up here, but what you want to do for a peanut butter is if you can get a natural peanut butter and without sugar added or less sugar added would be the best bet for keto. But even a regular peanut butter is pretty low carb and it works on like Atkins diets and things like that. This is a natural almond butter. This one happens to be a coconut almond butter. And this isn't the best example either because it does have some sugar added, but it still only has 3 grams of net carbs and only 1 gram of added sugar. You can also get the nut butters in a powdered form, which can be great for traveling with or for jar meals if you wanted to put these flavors in a jar meal. There is peanut butter powder and there is almond butter powder. These are some that I have. These are low in carbs and high in protein, also with some other nutrients as well, so they're a good thing to have. Regular nuts can be really great to have in your keto prepper pantry. Different nuts have different amounts of carbs. The actual lowest carb nut is pecans, and I've actually had pretty good luck with pecans staying good for quite a while without going rancid. These back here are Brazil nuts. That's another really low carb nut, and I have had pretty good luck with those as well. But like I said, I do eat my nuts, so you know they're probably not in my house for any longer than a year, but that means you can have a year's worth of nuts saved up. Nuts are really healthy. They've got good fats, and that high source of fats is going to make them great for keto, and it's also going to make them a good source of concentrated calories for an emergency. Some other good nuts for keto are hazelnuts. Macadamia nuts are low carb, but that's one that I have had go rancid a lot faster than others with your nuts if you want them to last longer. You can store them in the freezer as long as you have power and refrigeration. The other thing you can do is seal them, vacuum seal them in mason jars, glass mason jars, and that helps too. A couple other nut and seed options that are really good superfoods and great to have they are considered keto. Chia seed is an amazing, really nutritious seed. It's got a ton of fiber. It's got omega-3s. A good thing about chia seed is it can be used to thicken things because it gets that gelatinous kind of quality when you soak it in liquid. So you can make puddings with it. You can make jams with it that are keto if you use some berries and some, no sugar sweetener or no sweetener, and use some chia seeds to thicken it up. And these are hemp hearts, which is basically shelled hemp seeds. This is another really good superfood. It's got good fats, low carbs, especially when you subtract. It's basically all fiber. So that's another good thing to have in your prepper pantry for keto and low carb. And next I have got vegetables. Vegetables are important for, they have a lot of nutrition. They have a lot of micronutrients, so they're definitely important to have, but you have to watch your vegetables because not all of them are low carb. Some good choices for low carb veggies are spinach and kale, mushrooms, broccoli and cauliflower. Zucchini is a good choice for veggies. Asparagus is a good choice. Green beans is an okay choice. They are not the lowest carb veggie, but they are lower in carb than some of the other popular veggies like corn, carrots, peas. Those are all higher carbs. One good thing about green beans is that they are probably the easiest for people to get. You can just buy them in a can like this at the grocery store. Most people don't mind canned green beans. You're not going to find things like canned broccoli at all. And asparagus you can find canned. It's not as good as freeze-dried, but it's actually not that bad. I do store some canned asparagus as well. Spinach is something you can get in a can if you like it that way, and that's a good low-carb veggie. I also really like artichoke hearts. This is a favorite of mine. If you look, it's got 1 gram of net carbs, or just over 1 gram of net carbs. So that's a good one to have. Pickles and olives is another good thing. These have some healthy fats. The olives do. They give a lot of good flavor. They're low in carbs. Pickle juice is actually a really good, you can drink the pickle juice liquid as a really good electrolyte replacer. So I'm sure you could probably actually do the same with the olive liquid. So that is a good item to have in your prepper pantry. As well as sauerkraut. That is good. If you look at the sauerkraut, it's only 1 gram of carb, 1 gram of fiber. So that is a really low carb option if you like sauerkraut. Cabbage itself, I use a ton of cabbage when I'm cooking low carb, but I'm always surprised at the amount of carbs that are in cabbage. You can get canned cabbage, but the thing about this one is if you look at it, it does have 6 grams of net carbs, and if you look at it, they did add sugar in the ingredients. Sugar is like the 3rd ingredient after cabbage and water, and it does have 2 grams of added sugar. So that's a shame because this is actually pretty good canned cabbage. I was surprised. I used this to make a corned beef and cabbage dinner, meal in a bag dinner for St. Patrick's Day. And I also store dehydrated cabbage, but I was really surprised to see the carbs in that. If you can see what this says, of course, this is talking about, 1 ounce, but that will swell a lot. 20 grams of carbs, 3 grams of fibers. I was really surprised by that. It does say 4 grams of protein. That surprises me as well. But so that is something that would be a personal choice. A lot of people will kind of overlook carbs if they're coming from a vegetable. I sometimes do that. And so this would be a personal choice, but this probably wouldn't fit into everybody's low carb or keto diet. A lot of people will use cauliflower, freeze-dried cauliflower, as a sort of pasta substitute for different dishes. For instance, I make a lot of casseroles that I would typically make with pasta or noodles, and I use cauliflower florets in their place. I make like tuna casserole, for instance, and use the tuna, use these in place of the noodles, and then I can make a sauce out of like my cream cheese powder and my creams or my cream powder, different things like that. I also use cabbage as a pasta and noodle substitute quite often. Of course, zucchini can be a pasta substitute if it's in the right shape. If you have your own home freeze dryer, you could actually freeze dry zoodles, zucchini noodles that you zoodle yourself. Speaking of vegetables, I do like to recommend people to always keep some supplies on hand for sprouting and microgreens, because that is something that can give you a fresh taste and a fresh nutrition of some fresh greens. But you can do it inside your home. You can do it in just a few days. You don't have to garden outside for months and months, which is not always going to happen. This could be done in any season. So Having some supplies and some seeds for sprouting and microgreens is a really great thing to have in your prepper pantry. And like everything else, you should be using them regularly so those sprouting seeds don't go bad, don't get too old to sprout. And it's going to keep you healthier because you're going to be eating sprouts and microgreens regularly. So that's our vegetables. Fruits are not really included much in a low-carb diet or a keto diet because they're full of sugars. It's natural sugars, but it's still sugars, so they're full of carbs. A keto diet does allow berries is the only thing. Berries in small amounts because they're the lowest in carbs. You're not going to find canned berries really probably unless it's something like a pie filling. And if you do find them, it's going to be probably with a lot of added sugar. So freeze-dried is the way to go to have a little bit of berries on hand. It's definitely important to have things like this because they do have a ton of really good nutrients and micronutrients. And they also have a lot of fiber. So it's definitely important to include them if you can. But the only thing in these is the berries themselves. There's no added sugars or anything like that. Next, I've got what I'm going to be calling basics. So this would be like your flour, sugar, oil, all those pantry basics that you would typically have. Of course, it's going to look a little bit different in a low carb or keto pantry. So I've got some different things here. This is an oat fiber powder. You can see that it's keto friendly. 4 grams of carbs, 4 grams of fiber. This can be used as a thickener. This can be used also to help add texture to your baked goods. You can see that you can use it as a binding agent in something like a meatloaf, anything like that you wanted to make. Next, I've got some guar gum, some xanthan gum, and some of this, I'm not even sure how to say this, glucomannan, I think. So these are all thickeners that are considered keto friendly. And they can also be used as baking enhancers to help with the texture of baked goods. They're going to thicken. Xanthan gum is really good for thickening. So if you wanted to make a sauce or a gravy or something like that, which is going to be important to pull all these other foods together into meals. If you want to actually make meals, casseroles, soups, dishes with sauce, which is what I think we tend to like, you can thicken with these as opposed to using something like cornstarch or flour like you would if you didn't have to eat a low-carb diet. And then these, of course, also are a good source of fiber, and they also can be used as baking enhancers, like I mentioned. If you have any favorite keto recipes that you might have a favorite of these ingredients that you already use, I'm going to be coming up with some probably baking mixes and things in jars that I'm going to be using these in. So keep an eye out for that. Another item to have in your prepper pantry is some almond flour. This is a good low carb and gluten-free flour for baking. There's gluten-free flour if your diet is only gluten-free. That would work a little bit more like a traditional flour, but it's not going to be low carb. So it depends on if you need to avoid gluten or just all carbs in general. Almond flour is a good choice. Another good choice is coconut flour. They don't work the same. Coconut flour absorbs a lot more moisture. So you'd want to look at specific recipes that use each specific item. Then back here I have some Red Bins real salt. Salt is very important for every prepper pantry. It's important to have a lot. This is a large bag of salt. This salt is natural, unrefined. It does not have additives. It's really, really healthy and really, really delicious. Salt is important for seasoning our food. Our body needs salt to survive, and it's also important for things like preserving food. Because this doesn't have additives, you could use this for canning and pickling and things like that. Next, you're going to want to have some kind of a keto-friendly or low-carb sweetener. So this one happens to be monk fruit. I have a lot of different low-carb sweeteners or sugar-free sweeteners, all kinds of different ones. You might have a favorite, or you might have several like I have, but this is going to be important for lots of different things, baking and sweetening things up. You could take your freeze-dried berries and your low-carb sweetener and your chia seeds and make a jam, for instance. Next, we have some different fats that are going to be important for keto. You can have things like olive oil and avocado oil are some pretty good oils to have. A lot of people like to have more animal-based oils, so you could get ghee, which is basically a product of butter, and it's shelf-stable. It lasts a long time. You can get it in a jar. This is packets because I use these sometimes in meals in a bag if I need to include just a little bit of butter product or ghee, actually. But I also have that in jars, so you can get it any way you want. Lard is a shelf-stable, refrigeration not required. You can see right there, that's an animal fat. Coconut oil is another one. And then MCT oil, of course, which is medium chain triglycerides oil. This is really good for your brain. People use this on keto a lot. Another source of fat is going to be mayonnaise. I would recommend for Your Prepper Pantry, probably not even a container this size if you can stock up on smaller containers. If you go to the Dollar Tree, they have a little 8-ounce container. Mayonnaise can actually sit without being refrigerated. Of course, it's shelf stable until it's open, but even after it's open, a lot of people are surprised to find it can actually be out. But the smaller the container, the better. You might also want to consider doing some mayonnaise packets. Maybe you can save them from eating out like we did, or you can purchase them because this is going to be single use and you're not going to have any left over to sit out. Now the packets aren't going to last forever, so I would definitely rotate through something like this if you use these and store these. Some other condiments that will be good for your Prepper Pantry, you can get sugar-free ketchup, sugar-free barbecue sauce, lots of sugar-free sauces like that. Mustard is a good one that's always keto and low carb. That's how it is. So these are going to help to make all these other foods into meals or something that you'll enjoy eating. You can use them to make sauces. You can use them to dip things in, whatever you want. Another important thing to have for your Prepper Pantry is going to be some bone broth. Bone broth is more nutritious than just regular broth, and it's a very high source of protein. You can see these have 19 grams of protein in them. These are beef and chicken bone broth. These are some really fancy kind of flavored bone broth concentrates that you can use to add to hot water. Look at the flavors here: chicken, ginger, chicken miso, beef truffle. That sounds delicious. And these have 20 grams of protein. These also can obviously be used with some of those other ingredients to make your sauces, to make soups, to make meals out of some of these ingredients. Don't forget, you're also going to want seasonings to turn these ingredients into yummy meals. This is kind of here to show what you don't want. You definitely want to stay away from the seasoning packets like chili seasoning, taco seasoning packets, because they are going to have added carbs in them. Sometimes they have added sugars for flavor, and a lot of the time what they have is starches for thickening. So you want to avoid that and just use the straight spices, like use the chili powder and cumin to make your own taco seasoning or chili seasoning, things like garlic powder, curry powder, things that can be used to make a lot of good meals. Another kind of seasoning ingredient to have on hand that's good for your Prepper Pantry is nutritional yeast or brewer's yeast. A lot of people find the nutritional yeast more palatable than the brewer's yeast. I like them both. You can see that this has 2 grams of net carbs and 8 grams of protein, and that's in just 1.5 tablespoons of this, which you can use to season different foods. It's also a really great source of B vitamins, so this is a really healthy thing to have on hand. All right, so we had all this stuff back here, which is mostly keto ingredients for making food. And then up here, I have got some keto versions of traditional Prepper Pantry foods that you can get. So starting over here, this is a low-carb chili. This is in a pouch, not a can, but this is using those black soybeans like I mentioned. So it is a low-carb, keto-friendly chili. And you can see that it's got about 4 grams of net carbs per serving. This is a 2-serving pouch. And then down here, I've got some canned soup. Canned soup is a definite Prepper Pantry classic. And Progresso has these keto-friendly soups. This is a creamy cauliflower, and they have at least one other flavor. I think it's a tomato. So that is a canned soup that you can get. Once again, canned goods are going to last for a very, very long time. Here is a canned chili. Now this is a low-carb chili. This is a Cincinnati style chili, which basically is a chili without beans. So that's how this is so low-carb. However, if you just get the chili with no beans at the store, they usually aren't this low in carbs, at least not the ones I've looked at. So this has, per serving, it has 3 grams of net carbs, or you can do the whole can for 6. And so this chili being in a can is going to last probably a good while longer than the chili in the pouch, but these last at least a year or longer. So they are a good, medium term shelf stable food. Now I did throw this can of sausage gravy in here because when I looked at this, it does only have 4 grams of carbs per serving, which isn't bad if you're doing low carb. It's not going to be good for somebody who's on a strict keto, because it does contain starches, flour, things like that. So that's just something that if you are just looking for lower carbs and not on a really strict diet, then you could include something like that. You could make some biscuits with your almond flour, some of the other items that I showed, and have some biscuits and gravy for pretty low carbs. These are some more pouch meals, and these aren't made specifically to be keto or low carb, but I found that they are pretty low in carbs. One serving of this is 3 grams of carbs, so that is pretty good. You can see the ingredients are pretty clean. Pork, tomatillos, water, lard, onion, salt, serrano peppers, 1% less of seasonings, and a little bit of sugar. So they do add sugar, but that is a pretty decent low carb option, and those are pretty tasty. They make other versions, other varieties. I haven't checked to see if they're also as low carb, and I haven't tasted them. This is tasty. It's a little bit spicy, but if you put it on something, it's pretty good. Here is another pouch. This is a soup. This is a keto-friendly or keto broccoli cheddar soup. This Proper Good brand. I'm not sure if all of their things are keto or if just this one happens to be, but that's another good soup option. And then I've got a few dry soups. These that were ones that you would add hot water to that are keto. So this one is in a cup, kind of like the ramen cups, but it's not ramen. There is a tomato bone broth soup and a cheddar broccoli bone broth soup. And then I've got these Wild Zora soup pouches. They're little dry pouches that you add hot water to, ready in seconds, freeze dried, and they are keto. It says on there somewhere, I think. I guess it says it right there, keto soup. Now here's another pouch meal. I have tried this one. This Miracle Noodle brand, they actually make several different flavors of meals like this. And I have tried this pad thai, and I like this pad thai. I haven't tried the other ones, but this is made with the Miracle Noodles, which are super low in carbs. And actually they are made with this konjac is the same as that glucomannan powder that I talked about. That is another word for konjac. So these meals, it's a half a pack. They're a decent sized meal, and they have got 9 grams of net carbs. So they're not super low carb, but it's a whole meal. And I did really enjoy this pad thai flavor. I find that these Miracle Noodles on their own are a little bit, I don't know, they need some strong flavor with them, and so this one really works. You can get the Miracle Noodles by themselves. Pasta is a really classic prepper pantry item that is definitely not low carb or keto. So this is a low carb and keto version of some noodles. This is a fettuccine one because, like I said, I feel like it really does need some sauce on it to be good, some strongly flavored sauce. And then there's also these palmini noodles. These are made from hearts of palm. So this is another low carb noodle. This is 4 grams of net carbs per serving. Nope, it's 4 grams of carbs. It's 2 grams of net carbs. Now, like I mentioned, you're going to want sauce to go with your pastas. This is not a great example. Rao's sauce is going to be the best for keto and low carb. Rao's makes, marinara sauce, and they make a Alfredo sauce. And Alfredo sauce, this is just one I had for the kids, but of all the Alfredo sauces I had handy, this was the lowest carb. This is only 2 grams of carbs. But a lot of these commercial ones do have some cornstarch and things that some people on keto might be avoiding. You could always also make your own Alfredo sauce out of some of the other ingredients that I showed you earlier. And then in addition to being able to get the low carb pastas, you can also get a lower carb rice version of rice, because rice is a very, very classic prepper pantry item. So this is a cauliflower rice, and it's in a pouch. I have actually freeze dried my own cauliflower rice at some point in the past, but this is a lot easier for somebody who does not have a freeze dryer. You probably could dehydrate cauliflower rice. The only thing is I know that it does discolor quite a bit, so it turns out looking kind of brown. It doesn't look very attractive, but that might not be important to you. This one is additive free. It contains only 100% cauliflower. Next up are some breakfast options. So this is a keto Just Add Water pancake mix. Just Add Water pancake mix is a really good item to have in your prepper pantry. So if you are a keto or low carb person, this is going to be the way to go. Birch Benders, I don't think all of their items are necessarily keto, but they have a lot of different items, and a lot of them are keto. So this is a pancake mix. Of course, you're going to want a sugar-free syrup of some sort to go with that. And then there are also keto cereals that you can get nowadays. This is one in particular that I happen to have on hand. It's a peanut butter flavor. Of course, you could pair this with the almond milk that I showed earlier, or you could use coconut milk powder or something like that. You can also get a keto hot cereal, sort of like an oatmeal, but a keto version. So this is another option, and you just need some water or some milk hot to do this. And then, of course, you can also find keto versions of some things that are traditional snacks or breakfast. So this is a granola bar. This is a Kind bar. It's a keto kind bar. It's not quite as good, to be honest, as the regular bar that it's trying to imitate, the caramel almond sea salt. So what I sometimes do is I will get the mini version of the regular bar, which is not really keto, but it is pretty low in carbs still. But this is pretty decent. It's just not quite as good as the original. And then, of course, you can get lots of different keto granolas. And then over here, this was pretty exciting when I found this. These are instant freeze-dried emergency meals that are keto. This company, Next Mile Meals, makes these keto and low-carb meals. This is like the backpacking style meal where you would pour in the boiling water right into the pouch and you would have a meal. In fact, these can even be done usually cold soak style. It takes longer, but if you do not have heat at all and you just have water, you can pour it in. So these are portable and they're complete meals. They're great for your bug out bag or your vehicle or something like that. You can see there's a bunch of different flavors. This is the Cajun style jambalaya. And check out the ingredients on these. They're very clean. This has freeze-dried pork, freeze-dried okra, organic tomato powder, Cajun seasoning, which is a bunch of spices, and freeze-dried green bell pepper and red bell pepper. And it also has a good amount of calories to keep you going in an emergency. They have a lot of different varieties. I think I got one of each. So they've got the jambalaya, deli roast beef, chicken and broccoli, chicken coconut curry. I actually got 2 of those because that is like probably going to be my favorite. Sausage scramble. So they have a breakfast one, buffalo style chicken, a steak omelet. So another breakfast one, beef tacos, and an Italian style beef marinara. So these are all low carb, keto, emergency complete meals. Just add water. I thought that was really awesome. And then the final thing that I'm going to add here about your prepper pantry is going to be some supplements, because I feel like whenever you're living off of a restrictive diet, and anytime you're living out of your food storage completely, there's a chance that you're going to be lacking in nutrients. So it's good to have a little bit of insurance just to keep things going. So I always have, make sure you have extra supply of your supplements, whatever vitamins, multivitamin supplements you use. And I always have extra of this keto prebiotic. I put this into coffee, tea, anything. You can put it into anything. And this really helps with digestion, gut health, and things like that. And if you are ever in a situation where you are completely living off of your food storage, you never know how that might affect your gut. Now, hopefully, if you've done what you should be doing and you store what you eat and eat what you store, your body is already used to eating all of these foods. But just in case, it's good to have some things like this, just a little bit of nutritional insurance. So supplements, multivitamins, and prebiotic. This is a prebiotic. My vitamin does contain a probiotic right within it. So I have my probiotic there. If yours does not contain that, you can add probiotics as well. Prebiotics and probiotics work together to really do your gut health, your immunity, all sorts of things. So there you have it. Hopefully this has given you some good ideas and some direction to get started filling your prepper pantry with food you can feel good about eating in an emergency, and food that you can incorporate into your everyday eating to keep things rotated and fresh, and make sure your body is accustomed to eating them. Be sure to check out the description box below the video for links and sources to find all of the things that I talked about today. If you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up so I know it was helpful and I can create more content like this. I'm planning some low carb and keto meals in a jar and other similar content. Share this video with anyone you know who might find it helpful. If you made it all the way to the end of the video, leave me a scales emoji down in the comments, and check out this video next for some more prepper pantry tips. I'm Jara with Wicked Prepared. Survive today, thrive tomorrow. We'll see you next time.